Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karam. With me today is a joy to have Lucy Caldwell. She was the insurgent campaign manager for Joe Walsh's insurgent campaign against Donald Trump. She's an active political activist, a political operative who, and I'm going to use your words there, Lucy, well, she's actively trying to burn the Republican Party to the ground. So I really thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you here. I've got to ask you, the title of this is Just Ask the Question. So I'm just going to ask you the question: how are you going to burn the Republican Party to the ground? I'm dying to know.
Well, trying to still figure out what the best way to do that is, but I do think that we need many, many arrows in our quiver to fight today's Republican Party. This is not my phrase. It's actually a phrase of center left, Democratic power broker Mike Podhorzer, that there is an anti-MAGA majority in this country, right? I
Yeah,
want to work on behalf of the anti-MAGA majority. The problem is it feels very fractured right now. It doesn't feel like there's an anti-MAGA majority because that's how MAGA wants you to feel. So I think it is an all hands on deck moment. It is a prisoner's dilemma moment. It is a moment where we have to come together, and whether it's running independents, in places where Democrats don't have a powerful brand or damaged brand, whether it's making our institutional Democrats hold the line and get real about what the stakes are. It's all hands on deck. It's any and all mechanisms possible.
well, the thing that boy, you said a mouthful there. There's a lot to unpack, but the thing that I find hardest is that people are too busy fighting each other and not realizing they have a lot more in common than they have, different from each other. And I don't know how you combat. I mean, the divisive, and as you say, MAGA makes you think that they're in the majority. They're framing the argument still, and we accept that frame and argue within that frame. So it seems like you have a twofold problem: how to argue out of the frame built by MAGA, and at the same time get people to understand they have far more in common with each other than they have different.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the left and the center left also have accepted MAGA's ground rules. They've
Yeah,
accepted MAGA's own Overton window. You know, there was a, I saw, I actually think the New York mayoral race is a good example of this, right? The hemming and hawing among Democrats about will they or won't they endorse Zohran Mamdani. Like, why are we doing this, right? Why are we doing
right.
this? So last week, a couple of weeks ago, when the governor of New York endorsed Mamdani, Congressman Tom Suozzi, posted this totally unnecessary tweet where he said, the governor's endorsed Mamdani. So I wanted to make a comment about why I am not going to endorse Mamdani. And it's because he's a socialist and I'm not a socialist and I oppose socialism. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you using the language of MAGA, the terms of MAGA, the fear mongering tactics of MAGA? I don't share a lot of specific policy, uh, like
Well,
pensions
yeah.
with Zohran Mamdani, right? But I also don't need to go out of my way to make Mamdani my enemy. And if I were a Democratic elected official, I would certainly not think that that was the best use of my limited my limited bandwidth to go write tweets about the person who is going to be the mayor of New York, whereby you are just only giving ammo to the Republicans. So it is that MAGA is doing this. MAGA is divisive. MAGA does want us to think that everyone agrees with MAGA. But it's also like this is going to keep happening for as long as Democrats play this proverbial game of twister, contorting themselves to try
Uh,
to like
uh,
answer the moment of every MAGA talking point because MAGA are dishonest brokers.
yeah.
There's no getting them. You're not in a normal interaction.
Well, I think what you're finding out is what I've said for years is that the Democrats eat their own. The
Oh my God.
Republicans, if this were a Republican candidate, the Republicans would just fall in behind them. They would go. The Republicans are very good about sticking together,
You
and the
bet.
Democrats are very good about. And I'll give you an even better example than Montani. How about that book by Kamala Harris, blaming they're falling in with MAGA. They're blaming Joe Biden for everything. I get tired of hearing how they say she ran a perfect campaign, and I go, no, she didn't. She lost. If she ran a perfect campaign, she would have won, because that's the very purpose of a campaign, is to win. Now, you can run less than a perfect campaign and win. Donald Trump did that. But don't tell me that Kamala Harris ran a perfect campaign, because she lost. And they won't admit it any more than the MAGA would admit that Trump lost in 2020. And so
there's another sub-thread of the release of 107 Days that has percolated up this week, which was Kamala Harris made these comments about how one of the reasons that she didn't choose Pete Buttigieg as her running mate is because he's gay, and she just didn't think the country would go for that. And ironically, the same people who were telling everyone that the only reason that Kamala Harris lost is because she's a Black woman. And by the way, just to be clear, I do think there is institutional racism and sexism that absolutely drove some voters' choices. But that's the only reason she lost, because of an identity politics issue. Her defenders were saying that. And then she turns around and makes a relatively tepid point about the very same thing, that she didn't think she could take the risk of having a gay running mate. And then those same people are mad at her.
Yes. Well, how about the fact that during her campaign, she wouldn't separate herself. One of the reasons why I thought she lost is she wouldn't separate herself from Biden. She wouldn't say how she would do things differently than Biden. Now she comes back and she blames Biden. So, I mean, again, another example of that. And by the way, I've always, people say Pete Buttigieg can't win because he's gay. I go, no, he can't win because he's short. If he were tall and he looked like, Gavin Newsom, and he was gay, nobody would care. He'd have the hair, he'd have the looks, they'd vote for him.
He can't win for this. Well, I may regret saying this about Pete Buttigieg. No. Pete Buttigieg can't win because he is a bad campaigner who is exceptionally appealing to Acela corridor elites, because he is just like them, right? He is a person who, at this moment, I have not seen that he is a person who has a fabulously compelling brand of retail politics. But here we are. You didn't have me on to talk about Pete Buttigieg.
No, Democrats. That's so. And you correct me if I'm wrong, because you've run campaigns. I've only observed them and reported on them. Okay, I worked on one many years ago, but that was 35 years ago, and I only did it because I didn't have a job at the time. But anyway, the big thing that I see, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, is the Democrats will tell you, they may actually put together the best legislative policy for you, but they're going to tell you why they're better for you. The Republicans will actually ask you what it is that you want, and people feel like they're listened to. And that's how, Donald Trump came up with the border. I was there in the rally. Donald Trump didn't give a rat's ass about the border, but I think it was in Arizona where he showed up and he heard some people bitching about the, border policy. And people wanted, I'm going to listen to him. It's a part of the grifter. But by and large, I find that the Republicans gather more voters by actually listening than the Democrats do. Voters look upon the Democrats as being a bit elitist, as you pointed out, and they will preach to you instead of listening to you. Does that make sense?
That does, Brian. That's so interesting the way you're describing that, because it makes me think of the Clinton era refrain of "I feel your pain," right?
Yes,
that is what Trump is doing, even if it's completely disingenuous.
Yes, and that's why Clinton was successful, because he did go out and he did well. Of course, he had James Carville, a Southern Democrat, who had experience. He wasn't the elite, the Eastern elite. He was a Southern Democrat, so he was a little bit more adept at it, and Clinton listened to him. But now I got to get into this, because I love all the background stuff. But here we are. We have Donald Trump in the last 48 hours, and the Department of Justice. I don't want to say Donald. Yeah, I do want to say Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump's show. Have gone and indicted James Comey. And we're looking at, he said, and it looked like a private memo that he probably made public and later regretted, but said, enough's enough. Let's go get these bastards. He wants to go after everyone that's ever stood against him. Comey is one of his big gets. He never has liked him, fired him, is upset with him, and now he has Pam Bondi in the Department of Justice and Kash Patel and God knows who else, Dan Bongino, jumping through hoops to go after James Comey. This is a typical case to me of an American blind to justice, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a pretty stunning turn of events, but it's not surprising. It's not surprising, but it is stunning.
You can't be surprised by anything Donald does.
You can't be surprised by anything. And I was reminding myself this morning that, ironically, if you believe the MAGA version of what James Comey did, James Comey's crime is lying about something that he allegedly did or allowed to happen in 2016 on the eve of the 2016 election that an objective observer would agree helped the Trump campaign and hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign, right?
Yes.
Which was allowing FBI senior officials to talk to the Wall Street Journal about the fact that there were ongoing investigations into the Clinton camp.
Right.
And so that is a rich piece of the tapestry here. I think that one of the things that is most alarming about this episode, and it's what's alarming about the Kimmel episode as it relates to business, it's what's alarming about the threats toward Soros-funded entities. That's another threat that Trump says he's going to make good on, that he gave a press conference about this week. What's alarming is it's not necessarily that I believe that James Comey is going to be convicted and tried and convicted and sent to prison. I think it is actually, I'm knock on wood, but quite likely that this case will be dismissed. And actually, honestly, quite likely, if things like the bars are still working, that someone like Lindsay Halligan, the now Trump loyalist who's now at the helm of this case, not a career prosecutor, insurance lawyer who rose because she's a Trump person. It's that just the specter of this case itself, all of these things, creates such a chilling effect that people are afraid to speak out against Trump, that they're afraid to say anything critical, that they're afraid to give money to causes that do not have a MAGA worldview.
Right.
And this is how authoritarianism work. I think we keep saying things like, well, we're on a slippery slope to the crisis.
I think we've already slipped down it.
If we are in it, we will look back on this saying we are in it, and God willing, we'll get out of it. But we are deep in it at this moment. Yeah. It doesn't mean that it won't get worse, but we're in the Dante's Inferno of Trump insanity right now.
Well, yeah, nothing's a greater indication of that than the speech he made before the UN the other day, telling them that our country is hot, 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 and everybody else is going to hell, hell, hell. And there was one of the diplomats there texted me and said, "Do you all realize how bad this guy is?" And I made the joke. I said, he's talking about how hot we are. Well, maybe it's the flames of hell that we're in. That's why it's so hot. But I think you're right about that. I've said often that I think people who say this is a constitutional crisis, that's in the rearview mirror, folks. I think we're already in, and it's to your point as well. Mary Trump, his Donald's niece, she said something that just sticks with me every time I talk about Donald. She said, "There's no worst with Donald Trump. It just gets worse every day. There is no bottom." And so I think that, to your words, I don't know that people are quite cognizant yet of how deep in the shit we actually are. But the actions taken, and I would think that Comey would, and I think I read a headline saying, bring it on. He's happy to
let's have a trial.
Let's have a trial. And I agree with that. If James Comey did something illegal, then of course he should be held accountable to it. But to your point, what is it that they're saying that he did illegal? Lying about something that benefited Donald Trump. It to me, on the face of it, it seems absurd. But also to your point, and probably more to the point, is that what he's doing is his actions indicate a man who will stop at nothing to get whatever it is he wants. I think he ran for president the second time to stay out of prison. And then now that he's in office, he's going to make everybody pay that he perceives is his enemy. It's a revenge tour. And he will burn the nation to the ground to rule over the ashes as long as the people who've angered him get to pay. That I don't know how else to look at it. You're in the world. I'm not, but that's how I see it.
I have a particular perspective on this because of being a never Trumper, because of being an ex-Republican, and because of making a choice some years ago that I was going to say goodbye to all of the,
bullshit,
burn my professional network, say goodbye to all of the people I'd come up with, all of the right of the aisle connections I had, which was really my whole world, right? Because I could see that what was going on was so wrong. And that's a very lonely place to be, right? It's why the Never Trump movement is much smaller than people think and got smaller all the time. And in doing that, Republicans who were the worst people of all are the never Trumpers, right? Like the Washington Examiner kind of types and the Republican operatives were like, these people are being hysterical. And before 2020, their attitude was basically, well, you're hand wringing and saying all this insane stuff is going to happen, and it's never going to happen. And then all the things began happening. The fateful phone call to Zelensky, and then January 6th, right? The things that he was impeached for and more. And so it is very irritating to someone like me that even now, after all the things came true, all the very bad things came true, you are still met with skepticism when you say it could get even worse than this. And that's to your point about Mary Trump saying there's no worst, right? So I think that we all have to be putting aside, or maybe rethinking, but putting aside our kind of ingrained notions of American exceptionalism, like this could never happen here, because I don't know that that's true. It's not true. Because lots of things have happened that we didn't expect to happen, and many worse things could still unfold
we
yet.
were warned. I mean, to your point, look, man, I get pissed off when people go, how could nobody would stand up to Donnie, and this is why he got away with it, and why weren't we told about this before? I'm going, Jesus Christ, I can pull out articles I wrote 8 years ago that were read by thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and go, here, and I wasn't the only one. I mean, I'm not exceptional. There was Jim Acosta was standing in that room, April Ryan. Every day we were, pounding on the guy, and people look at us now going, the press failed us then. No, we didn't fail you. We're failing you now. But we suck. I get tired of looking at people in the White House briefing room and, asking, Donald questions like, why do you shoot rainbows out of your ass? You're such a great guy. I mean, that I can get really sick of, but you were warned before. You did know before. I don't know how you deal with the fact that you have to berate someone with the information constantly to get them to understand it. It gets, after a while, it gets kind of weary. I become weary doing it. But your thoughts on that, because you have worked from that side of the aisle, trying to get people to understand. Why don't people understand yet what the problem is? Is it because we believe in American exceptionalism, or is it because we're too busy on TikTok watching, people buy pizza videos? Or you tell me.
Maybe all of the above. And by the way, one real problem that Democrats and liberals have not solved yet is that one moment you're watching pizza videos on TikTok, and the next moment you're deep in Jordan Peterson style disinformation, right? And that that information ecosystem is a problem that the left really needs to find ways to solve. And to solve it, they need to figure out what questions to ask. And I think that they're not asking the right questions. But I think that, to your question, I think it is hard to make the connection to people to the idea that the rise of authoritarianism is something that they should care about deeply when they also are experiencing negative daily life, when the cost of living feels out of control, when inflation feels out of control, when they feel like they don't have a grip on things that they once took for
But gas
granted.
is under $2 a gallon, and eggs are cheap, and life is great. That's Donald Trump's preach, right?
But
Go ahead.
But Biden made that mistake too, actually,
Yes.
last cycle. He was like, inflation's not that bad. It's not that bad. And Donald Trump seized that opportunity. And so now the shoe is on the other foot.
So how do you combat it? You're the activist. You tell me, how do you combat this?
Well, I think, unfortunately, we need Democrats in power to begin acting dramatically differently than they are acting now. I think that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries coming out and saying they're going to send a strongly worded letter to Trump about how they need to meet, about, like the spending, the debt ceiling, the sort of stuff, like, let's come together. Just any kind of reverence to bipartisanship. You have a guy in the White House who's out giving speeches where he talks about hating his opponents, and he talks about openly about how Democrats are inciting violence and terrorism. I mean, that's not a person that you're going to maneuver to negotiate with. Get much, much more aggressive.
In what way?
Also, I think that Democrats need to be prepared to play hardball in the way that Republicans always have. As a person who has now spent many years working to help elect Democrats, but spent many years on the right side of the aisle and have been on both sides, Republicans are just massively better at politics than Democrats. Down top to bottom, messaging, infrastructure, just also then down to the culture of just what it's like to be a campaign staffer
at any
or
cost.
a staffer.
Yeah,
what's that?
The Republicans are great at winning. It seems like the Democrats are better at actually doing some of the governing stuff, but the politicking, it's all on the Republicans.
You have to win to be in power to be the
governor. Yes, you do. Well, there are those who have advocated, for example, that the Democrats should have a daily briefing from the Capitol to counter-program Donald Trump's daily briefing. There are those who say that the Democrats should be out in the streets doing, the Democratic candidates doing more more active role than just saying, hey, I'll write you a sternly worded letter. How would it, if you were running, for example, a Democratic campaign right now, how would you counter campaign against Trump?
I think that actually the moves that people like Gavin Newsom are making, I think the moves that Ruben Gallego, the senator from Arizona, is making, I think those are very smart. It is engaging Trump on his terms and not allowing him to caricaturize Democrats. It is reclaiming the Democratic Party as the party for everyday Americans. It is putting a spotlight on how Donald Trump talks, because we're all so inured to it, to say, this is actually really freaking whacked out. This is a really freaking whacked out way to be, right? It is also just reclaiming being normal and not engaging in performative politics. It's like Democrats acting manly, right? And not acting like there's something wrong with that. Yes.
Yeah, a bunch of wuss.
A Democratic candidate who ran for president in 2020, not a person who gained a ton of momentum, but said to me privately, he said, and this was a few years ago, he said, Republicans are fascists, but Democrats are aliens. And
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But you explain why. I know why, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's sort of like the who would you rather have a beer with? A little
Right.
bit, right?
Yes, it
And I
is.
don't want to have beer with fascists, but
No,
I
I
don't
don't
want
either. But but they give you the idea that they could sit down and have a beer with you while the way I heard it was a little different, but kind of along the same line was you'd rather sit down and have a conversation with as insane as Trump is rather than being preached to by an elitist Democrat, which is what a lot of, and these are like, I have, like relatives and in-laws in mid Missouri who I mean, and friends there who, in fact, I know one guy since college. He said, I'd love to vote for somebody other than Trump, but the Democrats haven't given me anybody worth voting for. And I find that telling because it's like, really, you really probably need to do a little deeper dive. But I
do
get
your
it.
own research.
Yeah, just do a little bit, don't fall for. But I think most people are so involved in their daily life that they don't pay as much attention to politics as you or I do, who are involved in it daily. And so when it comes time to cast a vote, if they vote, they cast a vote for somebody who just appeals to them on a very surface level.
People who have spent time with Trump talk about how he's incredibly charismatic. And obviously that doesn't extrapolate because to 300 million Americans are not having
Well,
one-on-one
I've spent
interactions with
time with him,
Trump.
and I never found him.
You don't find that. You don't find that.
No, I found
You might be immune because you are a professional who has to be immune for a living. But
yeah. The closest I think I ever found him being charismatic was when he pointed at me and said, "Playboy, what do you got?" Because he wouldn't call me by my name. He only called me by as the Playboy reporter, and he would. Yeah, that was kind of funny. But
well,
I mean,
good thing you were working for a publication where that better than being like, Mother Jones, what do you think?
oh, he would never
Playboy,
talk.
I'll take that.
Yeah, yeah.
He would
Playboy.
never call on Mother Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like Mother Jones. I like my mother. But who knows? So going forward, do you have hopes for the the United States, or you think it's going to get darker before we get to dawn, or do we even get to dawn?
I think that this is all happening a lot faster than any of us necessarily predicted. It is on a rapidly accelerated timeline. And I think there's an opportunity in that, but it also creates some structural disadvantages in fighting back. If the Trump Justice Department, and I can see in my own work that this is already impacting the donor class, for example,
Right.
if the Trump Justice Department begins investigating every center left group of any significance and claiming that opposing, say, ICE is inciting terrorism and violence, then it is going to be hard for liberal causes to raise money to fight back against Trump's authoritarianism. So I always try to have hope, but I never want to, and especially in this moment, have a form of hope that lulls me into a false sense that everything will turn out all right. And I
Yeah.
actually think even leading Democratic lawmakers, including people who are using their voices to speak out about Trump, they often revert into this kind of Pollyanna, we're going to get through this, but we've got to get through it together. Because it's hard to say, I don't know that we're going to get through this. I do not know. Right. And so I
Right.
think that having that awareness is going to be essential to what happens next. But it is both being able to stay the course of aggressively fighting against this administration in all forms, on all battlefields, but also not losing sight of how to make the Democratic Party better and more appealing to people and not so preachy, right? And actually like a vehicle that could help people in their lives and reclaim the working class and not just seem like the party of elite universities and, um, people who
Yeah,
are out of
elite.
touch with most Americans. I,
Yeah, well, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was thinking as you were talking about your mid Missouri relatives, you were talking about
Yeah.
having folks like that in your life. And I was thinking, I feel like everyone actually has those folks in their life, but I don't know that all of those folks feel like they have like liberal elites in their life. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like every liberal elite has some MAGA relative somewhere, but not every MAGA American has a liberal elite relative everywhere. And what does
I'm
that
just
tell
kind of
us?
I'm kind of well, I don't know how to describe myself because I've managed to piss off every president since Reagan and every press secretary I've ever worked with. So I fully fall down on the fuck them all. That's big and
Sure,
little. But I
sure.
get your point. I mean, just because I think that there are people who simply don't live outside of their own informational silo and they have retreated to, and look, I use stats for that. University of Chicago put together a recent study that showed that 45% of the counties in this country, 45 of them, do not have a local news source, right? And in those, that most of them rely on Fox News, and as a result, 91% of those counties overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump in the last election. So you get inside an informational silo and you feel comfortable there. That becomes your reality. And it's hard to live outside of it. And those who live outside of it aren't necessarily viewed as friends. And many times, even if you've known them for years, if you're inside that informational silo, it's a very tribal mentality. It's us versus them. I think you've got to find some way to break that down. And because the real battle I find is between the haves and the have-nots. I hate to sound, like a class war, but that's kind of where the real fight is. And the Democrats are exceedingly bad at letting people know what the real fight is. I go back to there was a time I was in the White House and talking to Jen Psaki at the time, and I said, "Why aren't you all out talking up this $1 trillion infrastructure bill that you all put together that is bipartisan? That this is what you can do when you work together. Why aren't you talking about that more?" And she goes, "Well, we've already talked about it." And I go, "They don't get it that whatever oxygen you don't take in the room, Donald Trump will take. In fact, he's going to try and take it all. So if you just sit back and go, hey, we did this once, people are going to forget you in the onrush of, flood the zone crap that Steve Bannon and the rest of, MAGA has put together for Donald Trump. Scandal after scandal after, after news event after news event. And by the time you stop to think about, oh, yeah, he did that, you're 30 miles down the road. I don't know that they've come up with an answer for that.
Yeah, and to your point about information silos and thinking about why are the Democrats struggling, how have Republicans managed to take power in this way and be so dominant? I think that a lot of it has to do with the culture around media and the fact that Republicans and conservatives actually are a lot less prescriptive with their people. They pursue much more of a let all flowers bloom approach with their influencers, and they then just they and Breitbart, of course, and he wasn't the first to say this, right? The idea of
Yeah.
politics being downstream of culture. Democrats try to influence culture in a way that then makes their messengers not very genuine. So they don't have messengers who have the trust of their audience who are using their platforms primarily to influence electoral outcomes. And even last year, in some of the postmortems of the election, I mean, there were influencers who were brought to Chicago for the DNC, some of whom are former activists themselves or current people who were prominent Black Lives Matter organizers who have large social media followings. And the Democratic Party around the convention was sending talking points to these influencers to tell them what they should say. on each night of the convention, right? Like these are the approved talking points while you're on the floor. Instead of thinking, like this person was, has a huge following and has been an organizer successfully and probably knows what messages resonate. So we're going to let him or her talk
Riff.
directly to their audiences in ways that resonate, right? It's like sometimes I think on the left, there's a tendency to look at the Republican media ecosystem and be like, "Oh my gosh, look, they're infighting with each other. They're fighting. Look, like Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens and Tucker, and they're at each other's throats. Like, look, it's falling apart." No,
No.
no, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
That creates the feeling that this is an intellectually diverse conservative movement, and that you could have a lot of different views. You could be pro-choice, you could be gay, you could be this or that. And the Democratic Party is just like so tight, right? Like there's a
Monolithic.
litmus test. Don't get off the talking points, right?
That's a
And that's what's
beautiful
doing
point.
them in.
That's a beautiful point. And I haven't heard it put that way before. But yeah, it's like the Democrats are monolithic, and
Yes.
and when actually they aren't. I mean, they fight with each other all the damn time,
Totally.
but they try to present it as if they're monolithic. And Republicans are actually kind of monolithic, but they let
Yes.
them riff. So
Yes.
appearance
Well put.
versus reality, details at 11. And the talking points thing is interesting too, because the Republicans do put out talking points, but it's
Mhm.
words to use, not thoughts, not to express. It's always use these words. Or I've seen, some of the talking points from the Republican side. It's like, if you get a chance, mention this. They don't tell you not to say anything. They just ask you to say this thing once or twice. The Democrats talking points, you're right, and I saw those during the Democratic convention. It's like, you will only speak about this, you will only do this, and that's a huge difference. And I don't think the Democrats get it, and I don't think I've ever heard it expressed that way before. So thank you for that. So here's my last thought before we and I appreciate, and first of all, I got to ask you to come back, because this is a fascinating discussion I want to have until the 2026 election. I am and that's where I want to end this conversation. Is, how do you feel about the 2026 election with everything, the midterms coming forward? It's been said that Donald Trump wants to put the National Guard in the streets, so we get used to seeing people in the military in the street, and he would try to suppress the vote in 2026. It's been said that going into 2026, he's going to fractionalize and destroy the Democratic Party by getting them to fight about numerous things while he continues to amass his power. So how do you see it going forward? What do you think the Democrats have to do to win? And what are your prospects at this point for 2026?
Well, I know that people are very focused on Democrats retaking the House, and I think that a lot of institutional Democrats are feeling very confident of that. I think it's good to have optimism, but I think that it should be cautious optimism. And I also think that the Senate map for Democrats in 2026 is exceptionally bad. And the fact that there is anyone credible talking about expanding the map, I think, is a complete fool's errand. I feel focused on blue state governors. I also would like people to spend more time talking about state legislative victories and Democrats retaking state legislatures, because the people, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that the people who are seated who win in 2026 and are seated in their state legislatures in 2027, those are the people who will be tasked with voting to certify election results and sending slates of electors going into 2029. As you said, one of the reasons it was so essential for Donald Trump, beyond his ego, to get back into the White House is that he would otherwise be in prison, and he should be in prison. And the stakes are going to be even higher after this election. So whether it is Donald Trump trying to run for a third term, and anytime you say that, people act like that's insane. But I feel
No,
like the
I think
last
he'll
few
do it.
days,
Yeah.
yes. But even if it's not, even if it's JD Vance or it's Don Jr., MAGA is going to try to hold on with a tight grip. And January 6th, that was just a rehearsal, right? So
Yeah.
I will tell you, having been on both sides of the aisle, the left well, now maybe they'll embrace federalism. Even still, they still haven't really embraced federalism. The left does not have any infrastructure remotely equivalent to the infrastructure that the right has at the state and local level, whether it's, the Federalist Society, State Policy Network, just ALEC, all of this infrastructure, the precinct strategy, which originated in Arizona and is a Steve Bannon favorite of just flooding the zone with Republican precinct captains and election officials. The left is so underprepared to go and be competitive with these people. There is still time to work to try to catch up a little bit, but the time where the stakes are highest is next year, and it is not just in the races that people are focused on. It's all the way down ballot. It's the machinery of how, God willing, should we be able to elect a person in, God willing, a free and fair election. And there are reasons to doubt that because of the National Guard, because of the stuff that you just mentioned, that should we clear all of those hurdles, we still have to be concerned about a January 6th take two that would be bigger, bolder, more out in the open, because the crimes are all out in the open now. And so my hope is that
$50,000 in a bag. Yeah, that's say it's right.
we're already past that. We're already past that. Epstein, what happened with that? I mean, everything. So eyes wide open.
Is there anyone that you see as on the? All right. Well, I agree with you. It's got to build from the bottom up. I mean, you have to go all the way down to the city council elections and precinct captains and volunteers.
County
And I preach
supervisors,
that all the time. That people, well, what do we do? Well, get involved. I mean, we don't even vote in this country. We consider, 60 or what was it, 60% voter turnout is a great voter turnout, whereas in most, democratic countries, that's not. I mean, think about it. If you get 60% of the people to turn out, you can still get a super minority, which is what we have, who gets someone elected because it's 50% plus 31% of the electorate can get somebody voted in, and that's what they've done. So you got to have greater voter participation. You've got to have people volunteer at the local levels. But do you see anyone at the national level with the Democrats that you think would have a chance? And I'm with you. I honestly believe that Donald Trump is building that wonderful ballroom on the White House lawn because he wants to lie in state there. You're not going to get him out of there until he dies. And then he's going to lie in state in that ballroom for a month and charge $1,000 a head to see him. I mean, I just feel that's where this is going. You're not going to get him out of there as long as he's there. So that frightens me, or it concerns me. But nonetheless, do you see anyone that could defeat him or MAGA in 2028 out of the Democrats that you see now? And I'll ask you about one specifically after you tell me.
I do think there are voices emerging that are very meaningful. I don't know if they're going to translate to electoral challenges that could get over the hump. I think that the way that Chris Murphy is talking is really compelling and good. He is the most clear-headed Democrat who's out there talking right now, in my opinion. And I think that Gavin Newsom is holding the line in a way that's pretty compelling. There are two former Republican electeds running for in governor's races now as Democrats in both Georgia and in Florida. Yeah. You have Jeff Duncan, the former lieutenant governor, running to be the Democratic governor of Georgia. That's really significant. You have David Jolly, former Republican congressman, running to be the Democratic governor of Florida. And so, there may be races that happen between now and 2028 where we see some new stars emerge, and that is a bright spot. I do think that people like Ruben Gallego, if they are not the ones to get over the top, they are certainly behaving and operating in a way that other Democrats should emulate. I mean, Ruben is a former combat veteran. He's Latino. He is a person who beat Carrie Lake in a year where Donald Trump also won in the state, right? He had crossover. So I think that there are some emerging superstars, and I'm sure people have more, but
well, Murphy was the one I was going to ask you about, and then there was one other one I would ask you about, and that would be the governor of a pretty red state, but he's a Democrat, Steve Beshear in Kentucky.
And
What
Bashir, yeah.
what do you think of
Yeah.
his efforts?
I think they're good. It's always a little hard with, and I mean this with no disrespect. It's always a little hard to read the tea leaves on how meaningful someone's victories are as a Democrat in a red state or as a Republican in a blue state when they're a favorite son, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's
he
true.
had name ID. I won't say nepo baby, right? Because that's what
Well,
we
his
say
father
favorite
was,
son.
yeah,
His
his
father
father was,
was governor, and
yeah.
so it's hard to know. Like, does he have something special going on in that state that can translate? He's a compelling voice, and so
Well, I
it
would
takes
rather
all
see,
kinds.
between you and me, I would much rather see him as Senator Mitch McConnell's replacement than, say, Scott
Yes,
Jennings. But that's who is intent on running, and that guy has about as much common sense as a dead fly. But that's just me having known him for a while.
the the roller coaster of Scott Jennings is just wild, wild.
I no. His biggest claim to fame is that he was at one point in time, basically, Mitch McConnell's errand boy, and that's how he became. That's how his claim to fame.
That's how what's that podcast? Ruthless. Those are all just a bunch of former McConnell staffers.
Yeah,
And they're out actually. I mean, Mitch McConnell, this is really dark and sad, but like Mitch McConnell is practically part of the resistance at this point, right?
yeah.
So like they've all,
He
shoved
was the
McConnell
very
aside, but
he was the very first politician I interviewed outside of my own family when he was the county judge executive in Jefferson County, Kentucky. And I'll never
wow.
forget what my uncle told me the night before I went in to interview him. He said, "You're going to go interview Mitch tomorrow, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You need to remember something about Mitch McConnell." And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Mitch McConnell's about one thing and one thing only." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "It's Mitch McConnell." And that hasn't changed in 40 years.
That turns out to be surprisingly evergreen for quite a few of these quivering masses of ambition. But
Well, listen, Lucy, we could do this all day. I
we could.
appreciate you being here. Is there anything you like to plug, and love to have you come back soon?
I'd love it. I'd love it, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot
Sure.
of fun.
Yeah, it has been. What would you like to plug? Floor is yours.
Use your voice. Don't stop. And you can follow me on The Bad Place at Lucy M. Caldwell.
On The Bad Place. I've seen that show. Anyway, don't you want to be in the good place? So
Yeah.
Danson's over there. It's the
Yeah. The thing keeping me on Twitter, whatever we're calling it, is just inertia at this point, if I'm being really, really
I'll be
honest.
honest with you, that's me too. It's inertia that keeps me there, and just to watch the shit show. But
You bet.
anyway, the name of the show is called Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Cameron. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.